Sarcopenia is considered the age-related loss of muscle mass. Now, you might assume that this is kind of a common part of aging, that of course, as you get older, you're likely to lose some muscle tissue, and that's just part of the aging process. I'm here to dispel what is largely a myth. In my opinion, most of sarcopenia is a myth. There's a little bit of truth to it, but it's nothing that should be terribly life-changing as you get older. So, what I'm going to do in this podcast is we're going to break down the 5 key reasons for sarcopenia. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you an anecdotal bit of information I think is really going to help make this very memorable for you, that I think will help you to renew your perspective on sarcopenia and just how much control you actually have on your health outcomes, your future, and certainly on your muscle mass as well. So before we get into it, I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe so more people get this video and so you get more videos from me in the future as well. All right, that said, let's break down the 5 key things that supposedly lead to sarcopenia, all right, to age-related loss of muscle tissue. Well, firstly, one of the most common ones is that as we get older, we tend to, remember the words tend to, we tend to use our muscles less. They go through less severity of work, less intensity. We're physically active less frequently and for shorter periods of time. Okay, we'll address that in just a moment. Now, also, there's the nutritional component. There's the component of we generally get a little bit more comfortable as we get older. We don't generally want to eat quite as much, and we tend not to get quite as much protein or good protein synthesis as we get older. I'll talk about that in a moment as well. There's also the issue of body inflammation, that as we get older, we tend to see more inflammation clinically in older people. I'll address that in a moment as well. And then, of course, there's hormone imbalances, the hormone regulation and the need for hormones to sustain or grow muscle as we get older tends to become problematic because we tend to see more hormone imbalance in older people. Now, finally, there's one more issue as well, and that's alpha motor neuron death. When you have alpha motor neuron death, which is more prevalent in older people, this is something that also inhibits muscle maintenance and, of course, therefore inhibits muscle growth. So let's get into each one of these things now individually, and I want to help you to get a more clinically accurate understanding of sarcopenia and what your role is in preventing this, okay? So let's start with the first two. The first two items that I mentioned here, we're using the muscles less and also nutrition being different. Now, neither one of these is truly age-related, right? It's a behavioral change that tends to happen, but doesn't have to happen. So if you find that you are exercising less or moving less, well, certainly you have control over that. If you find that you're eating less protein, you certainly have control over that too. Now, I know this isn't easy. You would need to start tracking how much caloric expenditure you have and what kind of intensities are getting distributed onto your muscles. If you don't have a strength program, you certainly need one. If you already have a strength program, it probably could benefit quite a bit with a lot more science. You can make it a lot more suitable to your body's needs, so you're gaining muscle and not losing it. And certainly in terms of what we're eating, we have a lot of control over, like I said, the protein we're intaking, but also the protein synthesis that is found as a result. So for example, we find that older people need more protein and better quality protein because their bodies tend to have a harder time with protein synthesis, with actually using that protein effectively for the body. But again, these are changes that you can make if you keep your gut health strong, if you're taking steps to get proper sleep, stress management, if you're eating the right kinds of proteins and potentially supplementing with amino acids as well. If you're doing all the right things, then you can combat that potential loss of protein synthesis with just a few simple lifestyle changes to keep your protein synthesis just as good as it was when you were younger. It can also be said and argued that a lot of the loss of protein synthesis that we're seeing isn't necessarily aging related. It's just because lifestyle wasn't really optimal over the years. And now as you're getting older, we're seeing a loss of protein synthesis because of decisions that were made along the way. So again, what I'm suggesting is when it comes to those first two components that I'd mentioned, neither one truly is age related. It's modifiable behavior change that are necessary. Okay, now let's move on to the third item, which was inflammation. Yes, we do find inflammation in older people. I'm going to ask you to stop and think about this for a second. If we look at someone who's 90 years old right now and we say they're more inflamed than they were when they were 40, is that entirely age related, or is it because our environment is more toxic? because our food is more inflammatory. Our diets have become more inflammatory. You know, could there be other factors other than just age that are relating more to how our lifestyles have changed over the years? And I think if you really do enough of a deep dive and take some late nights looking at all the data, I think you can see that there's a good argument to be made for that. I don't have all the answers here, but when you look at the fact that older people now are just in a far more toxic environment with less healthy habits than we used to have, and certainly less healthy food, well, it's understandable that we could have a lot more inflammation in a 90-year-old versus a 40-year-old of 50 years ago, because look where we are. Now, if you compare and contrast people today in their, let's say, 30s or 40s, and you say, yeah, well, they have more inflammation than we used to as well. This is true. However, again, most of the inflammation in our bodies is completely up to our lifestyle. You know, the lifestyle that we choose is going to make or break our IF, our inflammatory factor. And so at the end of the day, I don't think it's fair to say as you get older, you naturally have more inflammation. I don't find that to be very true. For the most part, it's a series of choices you're making every day. The foods you're eating, the stress and the stress management that you're putting forth, the depth of your sleep, and certainly your exercise and nutrition and lifestyle habits as well. Okay, so this only leaves a couple more items that tend to make up sarcopenia. So now let's talk about hormone concentrations. Now, you often hear that as you get older, your hormones get more out of whack. And there's definitely some truth to this. Inherently, within the body, there's going to be at least some hormone disruption as you get older. However, once again, lifestyle plays a big role. I'm going to suggest that you think for a second here about people who, like, look at Chuck Norris, right? He's in his early 80s. He doesn't seem to be having any noticeable hormonal problems if you listen to what his lifestyle is like and if you look at his physicality. I mean, the man says he feels the same that he did in his 40s and 50s. If you look at what he's doing today and what his body composition is like, I think you'll see that there's no significant noticeable change in terms of his athleticism or anything else that he's doing today versus long ago. Now, he's one of many, many examples. If you look at people who are athletic and who are into bodybuilding in their 80s and even their 90s, well, sure, it's hard to say exactly what each one of them is doing within their lifestyle, but it's certainly clear that if someone's focused enough and taking the right steps, you can keep your hormone levels quite good. Otherwise, if you didn't have good hormone levels at those ages, you just wouldn't be able to sustain the muscle mass. You would be going through sarcopenia, right? You wouldn't be able to have the mobility and the posture and the athleticism that we see in so many people in their 80s and in their 90s. So once again, I don't think it's appropriate to say your hormones just start to fall apart and go crazy and you have terrible hormone balance as you get older. I would say that is what tends to happen. But demonstrably, it does not have to happen if you're taking the right steps with exercise science, with deep sleep, with stress management, and certainly with protein and amino acids and proper nutrition in general and omega-3s and all the other important things that you need for healthy aging and to keep your hormones balanced as you get older. Now, the final item here, the final cause of sarcopenia is the death of alpha motor neurons as we get older. Now, this does tend to happen a lot more as we get older. It's not a vital part of muscle maintenance and muscle growth. It is a factor, but it's certainly not the preponderance of factors. And we do seem to be able to influence this a bit with lifestyle as well. So we find that people who are more deconditioned see a lot more of this death than we do in people who have been maintaining themselves year after year throughout the decades. So please keep in mind the goodwill that you put into your body and into your muscles when you're young will pay you back in terms of alpha motor neuron death when you're older. You'll see less of it than if you were deconditioned. But even if you are seeing more of it, again, it's one small factor out of many, and it is still influenced by the lifestyle that you're keeping today, by your exercise factors, sleep factors, etc. Now, before I finish up this podcast, I want to speak with you a bit anecdotally as well, and just give you a little bit of my perspective outside of the science, just from what I've seen over the last 30 years. Now, I have worked with so many people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I can't really think of a time when anyone took their program even a little bit seriously and who didn't then see very noticeable results, where they were clearly gaining muscle and strength and cognition and energy and all the great things that come with the right kind of strength protocol. Additionally, I've seen so many studies that will compare, say, a group of 20-year-olds who are deconditioned and not normal regular exercisers. And the study will also look at people in often their 70s, their 80s, or their 90s who are not exercisers. And we'll give them both a 6 or a 12-week program. And by the end of the study, it's always the same thing. It's that the older people gain just as much muscle as the younger people do. Now, if you look at some of the bodybuilders of today, one of my favorites is a woman named Ernestine Shepherd. She's about to turn 89, I believe, in June. Now, Ernestine, I was talking about 15 years ago or so. I was doing a lot of public speaking on on exercise for older people and geriatric health. And I would often show her up on the screen. Now, at the time, she was in her mid 70s. But even back then, her story was pretty amazing, let alone today. She is still a bodybuilder. She's no longer a competitive bodybuilder, but she's still a bodybuilder. And she's extremely fit, far more fit than most people in their 20s. And when you see her, you tend to think to yourself, well, she's probably been lifting weights since she was a little girl, right? She probably got started really young, was always athletic. No, by her by her story, she says she did not even begin exercising regularly until her late 50s. So her late 50s up to now her late 80s, she's about a year away from 90 now. And she is in incredible shape. Now, can you really tell her that she's experiencing this inevitable sarcopenia when she's 89 years old and a bodybuilder and she looks incredible and has great energy? Certainly not. She has far more muscle now than she had when she was around age 60. And so I don't think that it makes sense to say that sarcopenia is inevitable. I think the people who are trying and employing the science and taking the steps necessary to maintain or grow muscle are being successful at all ages. And I think the people who are only trying a little and their program's really not very well personalized, they're the people who are seeing some sarcopenia, which again, I wouldn't call age related. I would call it behavioral related and lifestyle related. So if you'd like to get my help individually, just comment down below or go to my website. It's in the description. You can reach out to me either way. In fact, my phone number is in the description as well. You can call me if you'd like and we can chat about your own unique needs. You can also get the help of another perfect personal trainer. In some parts of the country, we can send one right to your home to work with you there. And of course, we offer online training of all sorts. So we can help you out any way that you'd like. Please be sure to like and subscribe, everybody, and I will see you in the next podcast.